Today we are replacing an axle seal. I've got some dampness in and around the axle seal, so I'm hoping that a simple axle seal replacement will do the trick. And here's how it's done. So I've got my wheel off, obviously. I've got the axle nut off. In this case, for a P2, it's a 13 millimeter bolt, actually, not an axle nut. So that's off. My axle moves, so that's good news. And next step is to turn the steering full to one side. I'm gonna see if I can't get this out without removing the struts. Turn it all the way to the right. Push this all the way out. I'm trying to get it out, trying to get the axle out without having to remove the two strut bolts, and it's not going to happen. I still got a ways to go here before this comes right out the back, so I will remove the two strut bolts. So that's a 21, that's an 18. Sorry, 18 head, 21 nut. Once you take these struts off, there is room for the strut itself to move relative to the spindle. So mark this, or make sure there's a way of marking it somehow so you know exactly how it should all come back together. I'm going to make a notch right here. And another notch all the way down here. Alright, so that should do the trick. Should do it. Alright, the next step is to take out the two carrier bolts. Because this is the passenger side axle, there is a carrier right there that the bracket is visible, it's rusty. It's the piece in the foreground. The two bolts are at the top and bottom of that bracket, and I believe they are 12 millimeter, and they're not on that tight. Once you have those two bolts off, the axle should come right out of the transmission, and you can set it aside. Probably easier to get under the car for this.
I did end up removing both bolts from underneath the car without issue. Thought I was recording it, but was not, unfortunately. Apologies.
So I drilled a hole in the seal, and I've put a screw in that hole, and I've started to pry it out. Gear oil all over the place. Lovely. Okay, so that's a mess on the driveway. And you can see the color of this stuff coming out is just awful. And you can see it's really going to require some cleaning, because it looks to me like some moisture got in behind the seal or something. Anyway, gear oil is coming out, and so we're going to just have to let this drain for a bit, and then we'll clean it up. I'm kind of losing patience with this thing, so it's still dripping a little bit. I'm going to opt to put it on anyway. I think it's going to be fine. The idea behind putting a seal back in is don't put it on dry. So I have there's no shortage here of transmission fluid. Maybe not the cleanest, but I'm not sure it really matters. So here we go. Transmission fluid goes on, or let's put this on like this. Sometimes it's tricky to get it started. So what I've noticed, if you really tap it gently, and you feel with your fingers around it as you do it to make sure it's going in straight. It actually works pretty well. Just don't tap hard. Alright, feels like the right side needs a little bit more tap. So you knock away until you can no longer use the hammer because you've got that transmission housing in the way. Okay. Nice and straight. Let's see, how's this feel? Feels good. Feels a little raised here, so let's use a socket. There, it's good. I'm going to try it with a socket, and I'm going to rotate it around as I tap with the hammer for this one. Let's see here. If this doesn't work, we just need a larger hammer. I need a little help. It's hard to tell. You can sort of see it here, but the lip at the top is ever so slightly pushed outwards, so we're gonna have to push that back in gently. Right there. Hard to see.
It was really hard to get the camera up there while I was working at the seal, but effectively what I'm doing is using a very small flathead screwdriver, one that you'd use for electronics, and very gently pressing the edge of the lip that is protruding. There is sticking out the wrong way. You start from one edge of the protruding lip and you gently press inwards until the whole thing flips back to how it should
So without
sit.
damaging the seal, you gotta push that lip back in. So the lip now all the way around looks good. It's still not even past the chamfered edge, so there's still some work left here. It's flush with this. You need a socket that's not gonna knock the outside or the inside. I think that's too big. .12mm 3/8 will do. Getting there. At this point, it's past the. Anyway, at this point, I'm using a 3/8 to half-inch a 3/8 to half-inch adapter and tapping lightly all the way around progressively. It takes some time. Take your time. Tap until you get to the level that you started at, and I'm almost there. And then what you can do is run your finger around, and you can actually tell with a pretty decent accuracy where it pops up a little bit more than in other areas. So right now it feels like this area needs to be tapped in a little bit. This feels very, very nice. Yeah, the top half and over to the right needs to be knocked in a little bit further. So it looks like the bottom actually is pretty darn close to where it was. So I made a mark with a pencil, and all I gotta do is insert the pencil in there and see if the groove I made, well, that's, I made a groove, and so it looks like I still need about 1 millimeter or 2,
because the groove from this angle should sit flush. Smaller than that now. This is good. It's really good. Maybe a little bit of top. All right, it needs to be tapped in a little bit more up there. Fine. There you go.
I think I've tapped it in evenly and far enough in. I've cleaned up the area and we're gonna put the CV axle back in now. Putting it back in. This splines to connect. There we go, it's it. So let's see, I'm working on the bearing next. This fits nicely in here. There we go. There is an up and a down to this bearing, so you want to make sure you get that right. It's hard to tell which side is which. Okay, so if you look at the piece, this one has equal space on either side of the hole. This one has more space on the inside, and if you look at the bottom, there's more space on the inside at the bottom, so flip it up that way. There you go. It's on. Grab the 2 bolts. Put it on there loosely. Get the top one on. It's good. It takes. Ouch. That hurt. Okay. It's back on there. And let's tighten it up properly. Problem. That's tight. That's good. Carrier's on. It's in the transmission. Transmission's nice and clean. Put the axle back in the wheel spindle. There we go. Okay. Put the bolt in loosely. Make sure it doesn't come out. Don't put it on hard. Just bolts face the front. That's at this point. When you put this on, remember your marks. So right now, I need to move that in like so to get it right. So I've tightened the strut bolts to 140 foot-pounds. I've made sure that the struts are on and that the lines are still tight to the strut itself. So I've maintained my alignment. Top and bottom looks good. Marks still visible. Let's see. Marks are still visible, and they're tight to the strut. Perfect. I've tightened this 35 Newton meters, the axle bolt, and I'll put the wheel on and then tighten it to 90 degrees afterwards, and then we're done. Helper bolts on so I don't break my back.
Here's some quick footage of the axle seal removal and replacement on the driver's side. I apparently didn't take any footage of the axle removal, but I've got a different video you can refer to if you'd like more details on how to get that out.
I can just get my drill in there. next size up here. There we go. Okay, hole's big enough for a screw. Alright, so I got my screw. It's a regular screw that I've used after drilling. It is in there, and I'm now taking note of how far in the existing seal lies, and it looks to me like it is a millimeter or two after the chamfered edge, or the beveled edge. Let's have a closer look here. See, there's a bevel, and you barely see, maybe 2 mils past the bevel. It looks like, that's what it looks like. So if you look sideways, maybe 3 mils past the bevel. Looks to be almost the same distance between from the bevel, and then the same distance again on a non-beveled edge. Try from underneath. It's coming out, clearly coming out. So all I'm doing, as you can see, that I've got a hand underneath, pry bar up, and I'm pushing towards the other wheel, towards the passenger side wheel, and you can just get the angle from here. As I continue to push, this should come right out. And a little bit of leakage again, but it has clearly come out. Try it the rest of the way out like this, maybe. Should be able to just pull it out at this point, but maybe not. There we go. There's the old seal. And I'm gonna let this leak for a while, and then we'll put the new one in. Here's a look at the new seal. It's a Cortico seal, that's the inside. And then it's the first time I've seen this design, but there's a metal plate on the outside, which should make tapping it in a little bit easier, hopefully. Compare the new seal to the old. Looks the same. Alright, so to put the new one back in, let's place it gently, and then what you want to do is get a hammer and tap it ever so gently to get things going. So start with your fingers, get it on, get it somewhat seated, and then keep it going. Tap at it until I can't anymore, and then I'll use something smaller. Alright, I'm getting somewhere. There's, so you can see it's almost flush with the housing at this point. I've taken to using an extension and then tapping on the hammer sideways because there's no room for the hammer to be properly aligned, so I'm just holding the extension up against the seal, and then gently tapping while rotating the extension all the way around. And obviously what you want to do is, as it gets to this point, there is an inner lip that's visible here. The inner lip, if it starts folding on itself, you need to use a tiny little machine screwdriver and gently press it so that it stops folding. So far, this looks pretty good. I'm not having any issues that I can spot. Clearly get to the point where you have to change your technique up because you get flush. You become flush with the housing of the transmission itself. So then you pick a smaller socket and again tap very gently and progressively pushing it in. The key to this method is don't hit too hard on any given side, because if you hit hard on any given side, you'll slant the seal and then you may have to start over. So progressively tapping over the course of 10-15 minutes. Take your time, pushing it in evenly. Should be just fine. Trying to hit the rubber edge instead of the metal, because it looks like here I dented the metal a little bit. Pressure on the edge, that way you won't run the risk of pulling the seal apart. Looks to me like we're darn close. Maybe a hair further in. Or maybe it's just fine. Oof, it looks far in on that side. Not as far in on that side. Okay, the right side is deeper than the left, so let's give the left a little tap, and then we'll call it a day. Good look here. It looks great. So I'm just going to clean that up with some brake cleaner and then reinsert the axle. All cleaned up, ready for axle reinsertion. So some room here.